On the evening before Thanksgiving in 1971, Northwest Orient Flight 305 prepared for a quick trip from Portland to Seattle. It was supposed to be a routine 30-minute hop up the coast, nothing more. But among the passengers was a man who bought a one-way ticket under the name Dan Cooper. He boarded carrying an attaché case and took a seat near the back of the Boeing 727. He looked like a traveling businessman. Dark suit, white shirt, thin tie, and sunglasses that stayed on even after takeoff. He ordered a bourbon and soda, lit a cigarette, and waited, calm and patient. Not long into the flight, he handed a flight attendant, Florence Schaffner, a folded note. At first, she assumed it was a phone number and slipped it into her pocket without reading it. The man leaned in and spoke quietly. "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Schaffner opened it, and her expression changed immediately. The message was direct. He demanded $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting when they landed in Seattle. He expected the plane to stay under control and everyone to stay calm. He even specified the details: the money in small bills, and 4 parachutes, 2 main chutes and 2 reserve chutes, so it would look like he might be planning to leave the aircraft with someone else. To make sure she understood he was serious, he allowed her a brief look inside his attaché case. Inside were red cylinders, wires, and a battery, arranged like an explosive device. Then, he closed the case again. Schaffner carried his message to the cockpit and returned to him. Cooper asked her to stay close, keep her voice low, and avoid alarming the other passengers. The crew kept moving through the aisle, acting as normal as possible. He wasn't shouting, and he wasn't panicking. He gave instructions, asked Schaffner to pass messages to the cockpit, and continued sitting as if nothing unusual was happening, drinking, smoking, and watching the cabin. Up front, the pilots alerted air traffic control. On the ground, law enforcement began assembling cash and parachutes while the aircraft remained in the air to buy time. The crew tried to keep the situation quiet and contained. Above the clouds, Flight 305 continued to circle while the negotiation happened on the ground. Cash had to be gathered and counted, parachutes had to be found, and Seattle-Tacoma Airport had to prepare, quietly, before the plane arrived. Passengers were told only that there would be a delay once they reached Seattle. As Flight 305 circled and the minutes stretched, Cooper's demands became the clock everyone was watching. As Flight 305 approached Seattle in the early evening, the crew kept the cabin calm while negotiations continued on the ground. Most passengers had no idea anything was wrong. Cooper stayed seated near the back, quiet and controlled. He repeated the same message through the flight attendants: no sudden moves, no heroics, and no tricks. After landing at Seattle-Tacoma, the Boeing 727 taxied away from the terminal to a remote area of the airport. The jet stopped under floodlights, surrounded by empty tarmac. Authorities kept their distance. Messages moved back and forth through the cabin while the cockpit stayed in contact with air traffic control, buying time and keeping everyone steady. On the ground, agents hurried to gather the ransom from local banks, recording serial numbers before it was handed over. Time mattered, and so did staying out of sight. Eventually, the delivery arrived. $200,000 in cash, along with 4 parachutes. The packages were brought to the aircraft exactly as Cooper demanded. Cooper checked the money just long enough to be satisfied it was real. Then, he shifted immediately to the next phase, getting airborne again on his terms. He released all 36 passengers, one by one, along with 2 of the flight attendants. The cabin that had been full minutes earlier emptied into the rainy Seattle night. Remaining on board were Cooper, 1 flight attendant, and the 3-man cockpit crew. The door closed, and the plane became a sealed, silent space again. Fueling took time. The aircraft sat on the ramp while the cockpit crew coordinated with the tower and the ground team, trying to meet demands without escalating the situation. The 727 was refueled. Cooper ordered the next leg toward Reno and then onward to Mexico City, with strict conditions: low altitude, low speed, flaps set, landing gear down, and the cabin unpressurized. Before departure, Cooper also specified how the jet should fly: slow and low. The crew prepared the aircraft for an unusual takeoff, knowing something was coming next. The pilots pushed back on what they could, but Cooper held firm, especially about using the aircraft's rear stairway. He wanted it available once they were in the air. That evening, Flight 305 finally rolled for takeoff from Seattle, climbing out over the dark Pacific Northwest. Behind the cockpit, Cooper sat perfectly still, waiting. Soon after takeoff, he had the crew send the lone flight attendant forward. Cooper moved toward the back of the aircraft, setting up the moment that would make this case legendary. After leaving Seattle, Flight 305 turned south into a cold, rainy night over the Pacific Northwest. The cabin lights were low, and the aircraft now carried only Cooper, a single flight attendant, and the cockpit crew. Cooper restated his conditions: keep the plane low and slow, keep the cabin unpressurized, and make sure the Boeing 727's rear stairway could be used in flight. The pilots complied as much as safety and the aircraft would allow, adjusting the jet into the unusual configuration he demanded. Not long after takeoff, Cooper told the flight attendant to go forward to the cockpit and stay there. She did as she was told, and the cockpit door closed. For the first time since the hijacking began, the crew no longer had eyes on him. Minutes passed. Radio contact continued. The plane held its course. Then the crew noticed signs that something had changed. There was a subtle shift in the aircraft's behavior, an indication consistent with the rear stair being moved. The jet departed Seattle at about 8:13 p.m., heading southeast with its landing gear down and flaps partially set as requested. It was an odd way to fly, but the crew followed instructions to keep everyone alive. The pilots maintained their heading and speed, keeping the flight stable and the situation contained. Somewhere over southwestern Washington, in darkness and rough weather, Cooper disappeared from the aircraft, taking the ransom money and a parachute with him. Flight 305 continued toward Reno. When the 727 finally landed and taxied in, the crew waited for the signal that it was safe to check the cabin. When Flight 305 arrived in Reno later that night, it was around 10:15 p.m. By then, whatever happened in the back of the aircraft was already over, and the man who called himself Cooper was nowhere to be found. They opened the door and searched the rows. Cooper was gone. His seat was empty, and the money was missing. The mystery spread fast because there was no trace of where he landed or whether he survived. In the days that followed, investigators launched a massive search across the suspected flight path. Forests, rivers, mountains, and small towns were combed for evidence. Nothing conclusive turned up. Years later, one verified clue surfaced. A small portion of the ransom money, bundles of cash matching recorded serial numbers, was discovered along the Columbia River. It was the first physical link to what happened after the jump, and it raised even more questions than answers. Today, the hijacker known to history as D.B. Cooper remains unidentified. The sequence of events is clear: a brief flight, a precise demand, a controlled exchange, and a jump into the night. And after all these decades, the case is remembered for its final, simplest fact: he vanished.